The story of Edgar Allan Poe's death begins not in a quiet room, but amidst the swirling shadows of a city that seemed to conspire against him. A city whose cobblestones whispered secrets of despair, madness, and secrets that even time hesitates to reveal. Imagine him, the master of the macabre, stumbling through those streets in October of 1849, disheveled, delirious, unknown to anyone and yet infamous to all, found in a state of inexplicable collapse outside a tavern called the Volunteer. Wearing clothes that were not his own, a man whose identity itself was momentarily a mystery, eyes flickering with terror and confusion as though he had glimpsed some cosmic horror invisible to the ordinary world. And in those final hours, the city itself seemed to breathe a heavy, foreboding silence over him, as physicians debated the cause. Theories ranging from alcoholism and rabies to political kidnapping, even the dark possibility of revenge or supernatural malice, all whispered rumors that refused to die, and every clue, every witness, every document became a puzzle piece in a horrifying mosaic that no historian had yet solved. Think of the lonely figure Poe, carried into the hospital, delirious, mumbling incoherent words, perhaps trying to communicate a truth too terrible for anyone to hear. And here begins to descend into a mystery wrapped in layers of horror. The same horror he so masterfully wrote about, now reflected upon his own existence, as doctors noted symptoms that hinted at fever, delirium, yet no cause could be definitively pinned, leaving the world to question if he had been poisoned, attacked, or abandoned by fate itself. And in the shadows, some whispered that it was the very genius of Poe's own mind, tormented by demons of addiction, grief, and melancholy, that had summoned his demise, a poetic justice, cruel and ironic, while others suggested darker forces. Political agents exploiting election season madness in Baltimore, using the confused. And wandering author as an unknowing pawn in a sinister game, his literary brilliance rendering him a target, a threat to certain secret societies, yet no documents survive confirm any of these claims, leaving his final days shrouded in rumors that multiplied like shadows at dusk. And as the hours passed, his delirium became more pronounced, his body weaker, yet his eyes retained that glimmer of madness, intelligence, and perhaps a vision of horrors too vast for ordinary comprehension. Each glance a cryptic message, a riddle left for posterity to decipher, and as observers tried to console him, some reported hearing fragments of his last poem, a spectral echo of his life's work, and a haunting premonition of his own death. While outside the hospital, the streets of Baltimore seemed indifferent, carrying on their rhythm as if oblivious to the passing of one of the most singular minds of the 19th century. And theories multiplied. Did Poe encounter a gang, the cooping practices of the era forcing voters into drunken confusion? Did he fall victim to a botched medical treatment, a cruel twist of fate in an age when science teetered on superstition? Or did he foresee his own end, caught in a psychic spiral that only a mind like his could navigate, a spiral that would ultimately lead to collapse in a room full of strangers? His final thoughts a blend of terror, genius, and premonition? Visual cue, candle flickering over old medical charts. Sound cue, slow, rhythmic heartbeat. Imagine the medical reports, sparse and cryptic, handwriting smudge, a mirror of the chaos engulfing Poe's final moments, leaving historians to debate for over a century, each theory darker than the last, from rabies to carbon monoxide poisoning, to deliberate foul play, to a mysterious and unrecorded illness that seemed almost supernatural in nature, and then the twist, Poe's disappearance from public view prior to collapse, wandering the streets at night, unknown companions, possibly coerced into strange lodgings, strangers who claimed to know him yet provided no clarity, all painting a portrait of a final week filled with paranoia, delirium, and possible persecution. And in the midst of this, the city's newspapers reported fragments, conflicting stories, each more sensational than the last, feeding a public obsession that has never waned, as though Poe himself had written a narrative too terrifying to be ignored even in death. And every detail of his funeral, hastily arranged with minimal attendance, a stark reflection of the isolation he endured in life, whispers of bodies exhumed and examined years later, adding another layer to the mystery, the possibility of family or literary enemies manipulating his legacy. And through it all, the genius of Poe cast a shadow. Could have foreseen how history would enshrine him, not just as a writer, but as a figure whose death itself would become legend, a a riddle that mirrors the dark fiction he so expertly crafted. As if the final act of his life were written in a horror story only he could author, and in the minds of those who study him, every clue, every speculation, every anecdote is a step deeper into the labyrinth of Poe's final days, where the lines between madness, murder, disease, and destiny blur into a tapestry as terrifying as any tale of the macabre he ever penned. And in this intricate web, one sees reflections of the universal themes Poe explored: isolation, obsession, the inexorability of fate, and the thin veil between reality and nightmare. And as viewers, we are invited to traverse this shadowy world, piecing together fragments, questioning every witness account, revisiting every documented symptom, and confronting the unnerving possibility that some truths are forever beyond reach, that the horror of Poe's death is not just what happened in those final days, but the enduring mystery that compels the world to ponder, to speculate, to imagine horrors that defy certainty. And even now, nearly 2 centuries later, as scholars argue and fans hypothesize, the streets of Baltimore, the taverns, the hospitals, the very air seem to echo with the ghost of Poe himself, a spectral presence guiding us to the darkness, whispering questions that can never be fully answered, urging us to consider the fragility of genius, the cruelty of fate, and the eternal allure of the unknown. And as we conclude this journey through his final hours, one haunting truth remains. Edgar Allan Poe did not merely die. He became a legend, a riddle, a shadow that continues to haunt the world's imagination, leaving us with chills, questions, and the irresistible urge to look closer, think deeper, and dive once more into mysteries that even time cannot erase. Visual cue: storm clouds over Baltimore at dusk, fading to black. Sound cue: distant thunder, fading heartbeat. The story ends not with answers, but with a lingering echo of a life, a genius, and a death as enigmatic and compelling as any story he ever wrote.